Hey y'all, it's your girl Michelle Lene, and you're tuned in to Christ Over Culture, your destination for faith, news, and pop culture. Today is July 28th, 2021, and I am coming to you with a celebratory episode. So this month, July, officially marks 5 years of the Christ Over Culture podcast. Can you believe it? Literally, in July of 2016, I started Christ Over Culture, and here we are, you and me, us. Here we are, here at year 5, and I am just so thankful, and I'm grateful to God. I can't even put into words just what this journey has been and what it's meant to me. I'll share some thoughts today, but when I started 5 years ago, I just knew that God said, this is what I want you to do. I prayed on it, had support from family and friends, had Google and YouTube, and started this podcast. And here we are 5 years later in July of 2021, still doing this thing. And I have been so blessed because of it. And I pray that you, as the tribe here at Christ Over Culture, have been blessed by this podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. You have joined at a milestone year and time marker. So I just want to say welcome to you. But no matter where you came along this journey, whether you're a new listener or an OG, you've been down since 2016, I just want to thank you, because without God and without you all believing in what God is doing here through this ministry, through this podcast, this 5 years, wouldn't be possible. And so I remember really just starting out and saying, God, if I can please you, that is my goal. And to be able to bless others through what you are telling me to share and who you're asking me to have on this podcast, even if one person is blessed, then I will have felt that we've accomplished this goal. And this podcast has been streamed all over the globe. We've reached thousands of people, and I give all glory to God, because this literally started out as just a seed that he planted. And, so many people have been a part of watering it to grow. So got a shout out to everyone who has been here, who started out with me. I think about Jose Partita, who was editing with me this podcast, long Saturdays back 4 or 5 years ago. I think about Brittany, Vanessa, Amber. I'm probably going to miss people. Nadia, Erica, so many people who volunteered to help make this thing possible. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and for believing in what God is doing. So today's message is all about encouragement. I want to encourage you not to give up on what God has told you to do. And everyone has a unique thing that God is putting on your heart. And so I want to share with you just a bit of the testimony here of Christ Over Culture and why you need to keep going in the direction that God is leading you into. So the first thing that I will say is Christ Over Culture literally started in my bedroom, in a small apartment, in a bedroom. I did not have a bunch of tools or experience editing podcasts. I actually, at one point in my life, had a tremendous fear of public speaking. So you don't have to have a lot in order to start. You just have to have faith in God. The second thing is Christ Over Culture has always been community focused and community oriented. So being able to inspire and uplift people through the word of God and bring that into practical life. And so we've been able to host community events. Many of you all have attended those, whether it has been in person or virtual. We did a boot camp. We did a brunch, the Fill Your Cup brunch, about mental health. We also did a Fill Your Cup brunch where we talked about faith and finances. So it's really important. I think about how God says, love God and love people. And it's important that we use our time, our gifts, and our talents to share information and to share things with the community. So whatever you're doing, I just encourage you to share that with the community. And then the third thing is what I found with Christ Over Culture, and what I'm super grateful for is don't underestimate God. Like, he will give you something and it will pay dividends. And I've seen that with Christ Over Culture. The fact that I have a podcast and I've been able to do a variety of different things, whether it's live events, live podcasts, production work, video work, meeting people, interviewing. When I tell you, God has allowed me to use that in my career and just advance in my career. And I'll share that a little bit more about that here in a minute. But God gave me something that was completely outside of my 9-to-5 and day-to-day job that has literally helped propel and advance me in the day-to-day. So don't underestimate what God is doing. If he's telling you to do it, don't think about what the immediate payoff will be, because there may not be. And for years, for Christ Over Culture, from a culture perspective, you may not see the numbers, you may not see the money, but I'm telling you, according to Galatians 6:9, the word says, let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And so I am a witness to that. I can attest to that. I have a testimony that I will share here on the podcast. And when I tell you, do not give up. When you're doing God's work, he will pay you. And I think it's really just a heart posture. Like, are you in it for the payment? Are you in it for the recognition? Or are you in it for God's work? And so, as I mentioned to you guys, how I really started out just wanting to please God and, to touch others, that was my goal and my focus. And so it just really helped me focus in and hone in on what God was telling me to do and to talk about on this podcast. And his grace has been sufficient to even cover things for me over the years. So I'm just grateful for that. So this year, this time, I've gotten so many memories where it says, oh, look, back in 2019, you had your Fill Your Cup brunch. And so I've had these photo memories pop up. And around this time, we would have been having an event. But given the pandemic and, just the growth of the Delta variant, we want to make sure that everybody is safe. So instead of that, I want to share some really exciting news with you guys about God's faithfulness. So in this next chapter, right, we've completed 5 years of Christ Over Culture. In this next chapter, I think about the next 5 years, and I know God is going to do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond. And he is taking me to a different stage in my life. And at this point, I am announcing that I'll be relocating. So I'm actually going to be California based in Los Angeles, and I'll be there to pursue my master's in public relations and advertising. So I am so excited for that. I start school in the fall of 2021. And just so grateful to God that I've been able to use the skills and the experience over the last 5 years and be able to get into school and to have the support of faculty and staff at the school to be able to pursue this degree and be able to do it in excellence and be able to just focus on school. So have made the transition and making the transition from full-time work to full-time student. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me at info@ChristOverCulture. I will be sharing parts of my journey and how God has pivoted me in this direction. And I'm just so grateful. God literally has been with me every step of the way. And just being obedient to God and hearing his voice is something that I've really tried to do in this area. And when I tell you God has been faithful, it has paid off. He is truly going to take care of you and be true to his word. And I've seen that here with Christ Over Culture. And even in this next step, God will provide for you before you even get there. And I can attest to that. He has provided for me even before I've stepped in the door. So yes, I want to thank you guys because you all have been a part of this journey. Literally, without this podcast, I wouldn't be going to this next stage. Without God, I wouldn't be going to this next stage. So just shout out to you guys for rocking with me for these last 5 years. No matter where you came in on this journey, you have contributed to the growth and the success of this podcast and the impact that it's having in people's lives. So I am going to leave you with just a few nuggets for today before we head out. I want to encourage you to go where God is telling you to go and when he's telling you to do it. I want to let you know that the Lord will go before you. I just talked about how he will provide for you before you even get there. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. And that's from Deuteronomy 31:8. So when God says go, go. Be obedient, be courageous, and when he tells you to go, because timing is everything too. And I'm just grateful because I know that timing even for this was the right time. The second nugget I'm going to leave you with today is don't be afraid to leave your comfort zone, right? Leaving a good life and even comfortability can be hard, but don't be afraid to give up the good for the great. So the Bible talks about the fact that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. So I think about there's this meme that has been on the internet for years now, but it's like essentially we have a teddy bear and we're holding it in our hands. But in this meme, like God has this humongous teddy bear behind him. And it's like, if you would just let go of this little teddy bear, I can give you so much more. But we have to be willing to give up a good life, comfortability in order to answer to the call that God has given us. So that's the second nugget. Don't be afraid to give up the good for the great, no matter how comfortable it is or how much you know about it. That's another thing. We like to know things, but faith requires not knowing, right? Not seeing things. It is the unseen. It is the unknown. So don't be afraid to give up the good for the great, because God has something great for you that no one has ever seen or imagined. And then the last nugget that I will give you is don't give up. And we're circling back to the beginning of this podcast. Do not give up just because you don't see a payoff or an immediate payoff based on society standards. God doesn't work on culture standards. God works on his standards. And I'm telling you, in Galatians 6:9, it says again, let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So just because you don't see the numbers you want to see in whatever you're doing right now does not necessarily mean give up. Use wisdom, discernment, wise counsel, prayer, fasting. But if you don't see an immediate payoff, don't give up before you even really got started. A lot of us give up just because we're in it for the wrong reasons or the numbers. If you are really seeking God's face and he's telling you to do it, stick with it. Don't get weary while doing good. And make sure that you are seeking God's face throughout the entire point in your journey, because sometimes you'll have to pivot or start a new adventure. And you really want to be attuned to God and his heart and what he has for you. So that is the last nugget. Do not give up just because you don't see a financial reward immediately, or you're not the most popping on Instagram because of society standards. God has something in store for you if you do not give up. So I just want to thank you all for rocking with Christ Over Culture. It has been 5 years, 5 glorious years, and 5 is the number of grace. And I've seen so many people, it seems like, who have kind of stepped into the next realm or the next phase of their life after 5 years of really committing and doing to something. They really take that next step into the next phase of their life. And so it's just so interesting that God has just been able to grace this podcast, grace me. And here we are at year 5, and I'm stepping into a next phase of the journey that I'm so excited about and just so grateful to God for. So thank you guys for being on this journey with me. And I just want to say that if you have not done what God has told you to do it. If you know someone who has not done what God has told them to do or is on the brink of giving up, send them this podcast. That is the message today. Keep going. Do what God says to do. Go where God says to go and when to go. He will make provisions for you before you even get there. So make sure you guys subscribe to this podcast, Christ Over Culture. Find us on all of the social media platforms at Christ Over Culture. You can always go to the website, christoverculture.com. We have tons of goodies there, t-shirts, so you can rep the Christ Over Culture brand, the lifestyle, send that message. People always stop me whenever I wear the shirt, so make sure you get that. Also, make sure that you leave a review if you haven't. Please tell us if this podcast has blessed you and in what way. I would love to hear from you guys. It's super encouraging and it allows other people to find and to see this podcast as well. And again, if you know someone who needs this podcast, please send it to them. Sometimes we don't always have money or time to do things for people, but we can send them a message like this and encourage them. And you never know what seed you're planting. And this is a God seed. Christ Over Culture is a God seed that you will be planting. And I believe it'll fall on fertile ground. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm excited to share progress on this journey. And I just want to thank you guys so much for rocking with me and coming into this next stage of the adventure with me. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye.